Welcome. Thank you for joining our session this morning. This session is called From Prediction to Awareness to Mindfulness, Shifting into the Power of the Present Moment. In this experiential workshop, participants will learn about the brain as a prediction machine and practice tools for bringing awareness to our lives, including the thought-emotion loop we experience. A variety of mindfulness activities will be shared that can help tap into our inner wisdom and cultivate a different future by changing our experience of the present moment. We are very happy to have Susan Beaulieu here with us, and I will let her introduce herself. Oh, and one more housekeeping item. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can put them in the chat and I can help kind of bring them to Susan's attention throughout. So feel free to pop any questions into the chat. Thanks, Susan.
Thanks, Cassandra. Bonjour. Nagana bene sikwe indigenous cause, megane godem, mesquagame wazaga eganing and donjaba. Hello, my name is Susan Beaulieu. I currently reside in the Brainerd Lakes area with my family. I work for the University of Minnesota Extension as an extension educator. I used to work at Minnesota Communities Caring for Children with Cassandra and Kate and many others, and miss them very much, but I'm really grateful to be asked to come here and share with you today. So I'm an ACE interface presenter and also a mind-body medicine facilitator. So a lot of the work that I've been doing in the communities I've been working with is around understanding trauma, healing from trauma, and I just love the neuroscience pieces of it. I find that really helpful for me. I do that all the time. But I want to start with my kids. So my kids are really the driving force that have helped me to want to learn more, to integrate what I'm learning, not just professionally, but also personally. Yeah, my oldest daughter, she's 22, but it wasn't until about 7 years ago that I even realized that I had this healing work to do. And so my kids have really been a driver and a motivator for me in learning and growing and stepping into the discomfort of the new, knowing that the learning is on the other side of that and within that discomfort. So I like to start all of my presentations when possible with some sort of a grounding practice. And this soft belly breathing is a really foundational piece of the mind body medicine curriculum that I use. Some of you have probably done soft belly. Some of you have maybe even done soft belly with me. I'm not sure. But our breath is literally the most powerful tool that we have to regulate our nervous system. And so in soft belly, what we're doing is we're bringing the breath from sort of the chest area, which when we're in that fight or flight mode, you might notice we sort of tend to breathe shallow and in our chest. So in soft belly, we're trying to bring that breath deep into the diaphragm. And what that does is it activates a nerve called the vagal nerve that runs from the brain, around the heart, and then around the stomach. And so when we are breathing deeply into our belly, it activates that vagal nerve, which sends the message back to the brain that we're physically safe. Because if you are running or fighting for your life, taking that slow, deep belly breath is impossible. So the fact you can take it means that you are physically safe. So I would invite you to just get yourself into a comfortable position. If closing your eyes feels good, you can close your eyes. Otherwise, just having a soft gaze down at whatever's in front of you, trying to minimize visual distractions. And so as we start, we're going to be breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. Remembering as you breathe in to bring that air deep into the diaphragm. Sort of imagine the belly like a balloon, and you're slowly filling it up with air. On the exhale, out through your mouth, nice and slow, releasing the air. And if it's helpful for you to help you with your focus, you can think to yourself, soft as you breathe in through the nose, and belly as you breathe out through the mouth. And we'll close with a grounding breath, just a nice big inhale in through the nose, exhaling slowly out of the mouth. And then when you're ready to come back, just gently opening your eyes and maybe pausing for a moment to notice if there are any shifts at all in how your body feels, sort of the quality of your thoughts, how fast they're moving, your emotions. Just sort of checking in for a moment, seeing if there are any shifts at all. And there might not be, and that's okay if there aren't. But we're just noticing what's here. All right. So today we're going to primarily talk about the brain as a prediction machine. And we're going to talk about how we thought the brain worked. We're going to talk about what we know now about how the brain works. And we're going to talk about some implications for that. We're going to do several different practices. So we just did soft belly. We'll do a body scan. We'll do a meditation, sort of looking at the thought emotion loop and some general awareness. And then we're also going to talk about emotions and thoughts and that mind, body, heart connection. So this is how we thought the brain worked. We thought that our senses were taking in sensory information from outside and inside our body, and our brain is processing it, and then we have a response. So it's sort of like a stimulus response, is how we thought our brain worked. Another metaphor was sort of this attentional spotlight or searchlight. So, whatever it is that we thought we were trying to focus on, that sort of our awareness came to it like a spotlight. So, that's sort of how we thought our brain worked. But actually, our senses are only picking up a very small amount of what's actually happening around us in any given moment. Some of this has to do with the sensory tools that we have on our body. So, as humans, what do we see, hear, taste, touch, smell? Proprioception, vestibular, interoception, all those types of senses. So, like that sensory input that's coming in. But that is different by species. So, you can see here, what as humans we're sort of able to see as far as color and wavelength versus a bee, what a bee sees. And how this shows up in how we experience the world differently is how we see colors in the real world. So, bees see flowers more like this compared to how we would typically see a flower. Um, Here's another example. So you can see our senses are really good in certain, if they're really good in certain environments. So for example, at night, if we have really good night vision, that's probably going to shape what we do at night. If we have really good night vision, that means that we can work and we can hunt and we can do things like that in the night. Um, And so, if as humans, we then are able to sort of get a new sense, get some night vision, that allows us the opportunity to be able to do things that we can't do with our regular senses. Just really quickly, there's a neuroscientist, his name is Dr. David Eagleman, and him and his lab, they've been studying how they, like, for example, they have these vests that they put on people that have just little, like, they just sort of like buzz on people's backs. And after people wear it for a while, they're able to do things like read the stock market based on the buzzing on their back. So our brains are constantly trying to make sense of the sensory input that we have coming in. And we can get additional sensory tools that can help us to experience the world in an even more powerful way. So this is sort of my belief, but when I think about the fact that as humans we have limited sensory input, um, it seems sort of pretentious to me that we have this notion that we know what reality is, because whose reality is really correct? So in the top screen you see like how a human would see this room versus how a snake sees the room. With birds, they thought for a long time that birds could sense the magnetic field and pulls of the earth to be able to navigate, and what they're discovering is that there's something, a protein in their retina that they believe helps the bird to be able to actually see the magnetic fields as little black dots. So it acts sort of like a highway, a guiding for the birds. So that's how they experience their world. And trees communicate through chemicals. under the ground communicating with one another, not through language like we do, but through chemicals, and that's how they communicate. So this whole notion of this is something that I just think is interesting, like what is reality and whose reality are we talking about? But it turns out that it's not just other species that experience the world differently from you or from me, because our brains are wired through experience and each of us have different lived experiences. Our brains process information coming in differently. So if you would please just put in the chat, what color do you see this dress? Is it blue and black or is it white and gold? So just take a moment, plug into the chat. Is it blue and black or white and gold?
Seeing a lot of white and gold and
Okay.
some blue and black.
Okay.
Couple blue and blacks, a lot of people saying white and gold.
Okay. So I'll give it maybe just a couple more seconds for others who didn't get a chance to respond yet. So lots of white and gold, a few blue and black. So it turns out that this dress is actually blue and black. And for those of you who don't believe me, because I totally only see gold and white, so I'm with you. It's true. It's black and blue. And if you Google it, you can find different things that show you how you can be able to see the opposite color than what you see right now. But how we perceive this dress is based on the part of the dress that we're focusing on, how we perceive the light around the dress or on the dress. So our perception of these things shape the way that we see the world. It's sort of interesting because when I was going through my presentation the other night, my husband and my 11-year-old were sitting on the bed, and just for fun, I said, "What color is this dress?" And my husband was like, "Well, it's black and blue." And I was thinking they were going to say gold and white because that's what I see. And he said, "Well, it's black and blue." And my daughter said, "Well, it's purple and gold." And I saw it as gold and white. So even the three of us in one family saw this dress completely differently. So the reality is that there is no one objective reality, but rather our reality is based on the senses of our species, as well as the way that our brain processes those senses. So this is another important piece about the brain, is that it is constantly sort of filtering out information that it deems unimportant. And it does this because if our brain processed all of the sensory input that's constantly coming in, we would feel really overwhelmed very quickly. So I don't know if any of you have ever lived in a house that was near like a train yard or, like a railroad or uh, maybe I know one of the houses that we lived at, there was a pond there, and every spring the frogs, who knew frogs could be so loud? And I remember that first spring there, I thought, I am never going to be able to sleep. Well, eventually I was able to fall asleep. The next night it was hard for me to fall asleep. But after a couple nights, I didn't even hear them anymore. I basically could just go to bed, fall asleep, and the sound wasn't an issue. And it wasn't because the frogs were any less loud. It was because my brain decided that that information was not important, not relevant to my life, and therefore it could sort of tamp down that sound in my brain so that I wasn't even noticing it anymore. Another example would be is if you were having dinner with a friend in a loud restaurant, or if you've ever tried to talk to someone, you've gone maybe to a concert with them and it's really loud in there, your brain is able to sort of turn down the volume on the things that it deems not important to help you be able to focus in on the thing that is important. Um, let's see. So another really interesting thing that our brain does is it actually can add sensory information or input that isn't there. So some of you may have done this before, but go ahead and on this image of this woman, just stare at those colored dots that are by her left eye. Just stare at those colored dots for about 20 seconds. So we're just going to look at the dots. Just continuing to focus on those colored dots by her eye. And then now go ahead and move your eyes and look at the black X. And what do you notice? You can go ahead and put that in the chat if you noticed anything. after looking at the dots and then looking at the black X, what did you notice?
Her face appears in color. There's a shadow image of her face. The face appears like a photo.
Mhm.
Shadow
Yeah.
image.
So I don't have time to get into the science behind this either, but it's pretty interesting. So yeah, so for a lot of us, after staring at those colors and then we look at the black X, we're able to see her face in color as if we're looking at a photo, even though we literally have no idea what she looks like or what color anything is. So that's our brain sort of filling in what we expect to see. Here's another example. Go ahead and try to read this if you can. So are any of you able to read it? If you can, maybe in the chat, just plug in that you were able to read it.
We've got a lot of folks saying yes,
Yeah.
but it takes a bit.
Yep.
You can only read some of it, not all of it. Able to read most of it. Yes, once I got the flow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it says, isn't it amazing that you can read this, even though only a minority of the letters are correct? The neocortex is amazing. And did you know that reading this becomes more automatic as you go along? This is true, even though right now you are unlikely to be conscious of which symbols are replacing which letters. So we're not thinking about the letters, symbols, and how they've been switched out, but our brain is sort of predicting based on what this looks like, what could these words be? So again, our brain is sort of filling in where there isn't information.
Susan, I did have one question.
Yeah.
If we did not see the face, why is that?
It could have either been just because you maybe weren't looking at it long enough, because it said like 20 to 30 seconds. I might not have given us a full 30 seconds. So I would just encourage you to maybe try it. You can really easily like Google this image and sort of do it, and then look at this, read up on the science behind it. It has to do with your eyes and your retina and the colors and all those types of things, and then how our brain uses that to sort of fill in the color. But yeah, so just I would encourage you to try it again and see if it works for you. All right. So our sensory input is one way that we take in and experience the world. And it's the primary way that we take in the world when we're young and our brains are trying to make sense of all the sensory information that's coming in, because the world is new and everything that we're experiencing, our brain has to figure out, what is this? What is this? What is that? But as we get older, and sort of around 5 years is when they notice this shift. 5 years and beyond is when our brain began to shift from simply experiencing the world through our senses to starting to predict it based on our past experiences. And of course, the older we get, the more experiences we have, the better we get at predicting. So this is Dr. Barrett. She's a neuroscientist, and she talks about the brain as a prediction machine. So our brains mostly predict what's going to happen, and because it turns out prediction is quite a bit more efficient than actually taking in sensory input. And more efficient metabolically than reacting to our experience as it unfolds. So the example of like being able to read that is a good example of prediction. So I'm going to read this. Dr. Barrett says, neuroscientists like to say that our day-to-day experience is a carefully controlled hallucination, constrained by the world and your body, but ultimately constructed by your brain. So rather than sort of reacting to what's really happening in our world, our brain is making guesses and drawing from our deep backlog of experiences and memory, and then constructing what we believe to be our reality, And then we cross-reference that with any incoming data from our heart, our lungs, our metabolism, our immune system, as well as our surrounding world. And then we adjust as needed. So if something doesn't align with what we predict to see, then I'll talk about that in a little bit. But for the most part, our brain is sort of in this prediction mode. It turns out the brain's most important job isn't actually thinking, seeing, feeling, or doing those things that we often associate with being human and the importance of having a human brain. But the nervous system's primary job, and many of you probably know this, of which the brain is a large part of, is to keep us alive, for us to be able to survive. And for the brain, our brain anticipates our body's needs, and then it tries to meet them before that need actually arrives. Am I breaking up?
You did a little bit.
You did a little bit, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. But am I back now?
Or
Yes.
you've been kind
Okay,
of freezing.
thank you. I'm wondering, one of the things I learned that I didn't know is if everyone else can shut your video off, then it takes less of my bandwidth to like allow all of the images in. So then I think it might be a little bit more stable. We'll try that. But when we go into Q&A, I'd love to see everyone's faces, so we can definitely turn the videos on then. Thank you. So an example of this prediction is like when you start to get hungry, or your brain tells you that you're starting to get hungry. It's actually before your body even needs the food. It's anticipating that your body's going to need food. So it tells you that you're hungry so that you'll start to, take care of that hunger and then be able to get replenished in that way to get more energy. Let's see. I'm gonna read this quote too from Dr. Barrett. She says, every single thing that you do and every single thing that you feel and think, basically everything you experience, is some combination of what's going on inside your brain and what's going on outside your skull. So our brain doesn't actually know what's going on inside or outside the body. It's only receiving this sense data. So instead of our brain asking, what is this? Our brain is asking, what is this like, most like from my past experience? So what does this mean for our lives today? One of the things that Dr. Barrett says is like, we can't go back and we can't change our past. But what we can do is we can change our present. And by changing our present, we're cultivating a different future. She sort of talks about it like seeding our brain to predict differently in the future. So if we change what we do, what we say, what we feel, it's literally seeding our brain in this moment to respond, or to not respond, excuse me, to predict differently in the future. She says the actions and the experiences of your brain the actions and the experiences that your brain makes today becomes your brain's predictions for tomorrow. So making a new effort to cultivate new experiences and learn new things today is an investment in your future tomorrow. Because remember, anything that we're learning in this moment helps us to be able to predict better and differently into the future. She says some people have control over has control over many things in their lives, and some of us don't have a lot of control, but we all have control over something. And it's not just our past experiences that shape our brain's predictions, but it's also what we consume. So other sources of information, news, social media, TV, movies, etc. And the thing that's really challenging about this is that a lot of the things that happen at these cultural levels, when we're just sort of passively consuming news and social media and movies and TV and books and things like that, is that we're not really aware of what it's seeding our brains with, what types of predictions. And so, we hear a lot about things around unconscious bias and things like that, that is sort of just in the water of the society that we live in. And so definitely paying attention to these other sources is an important part of helping our brain to be able to predict in ways that are more helpful instead of harmful. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. And again, our unchecked biases, they do shape our reality. I'm going to give an example here. So some of you probably remember Amy Cooper. She was the white woman who was walking her dog in New York City and came across a man who was bird watching. He was Black. And they had an encounter, and she ended up calling the police. I remember hearing a trauma expert talk about listening to the phone call that Amy made and to the police. And this trauma expert said that they could really tell that she was dysregulated by the sort of how her voice was doing this, and several other things that sort of keyed him into the fact that she was completely dysregulated in her nervous system. And this trauma expert said that this was likely based on her biases of Black men, which was likely shaped by the society we live in. And it led her to believe that she was indeed in danger, even though she was not in danger. So this is just a really simple example of how, of many countless ways that our biases can show up in society in ways that cause others harm and even death. So Dr. Barrett tells us that having control of your actions isn't only about avoiding certain actions in the heat of the moment, but it's also about seeding your brain to have more flexibility in constructing your predictions before the heat of the moment. So again, like that learning and that growing and having more experiences, varied experiences, helps our brain to be able to predict more accurately. So we're going to talk just a little bit about the brain and stress, because again, the brain's primary job is to sort of keep this body budget for us. And so when we are under stress, uh, stress is like a withdrawal from the body budget. So the deposits that we make would be things like sleeping, eating, hanging out with loved ones, those types of things. Those help to sort of replenish our body and give our body the energy that we need. And good stress is a withdrawal from the body budget followed by a deposit. So, there's good stress and there's toxic stress or chronic stress. And we're talking in this instance, good stress, we have a withdrawal, but then a deposit back into the system. Whereas with chronic stress, we have a withdrawal and a withdrawal and a withdrawal and a withdrawal. And we all know, those of us that have bank accounts, what happens if you keep making withdrawals and you're not making deposits? After a while, it catches up to you, right? And it really causes problems. And so she goes on to say that learning is a good investment in of energy because it's likely to pay dividends in the future. So the key is to replenish what we spent. So really checking in with yourself and noticing, like, where are you at? How are you feeling energetically? And what do you need to do to, make some deposits so that you can continue to make withdrawals, which we're going to do regardless, but make them in a healthier way. The other thing she talks about, and this really helped me sort of understand the impacts of things like ACEs or historical trauma or even COVID that we've all been going through over this last year, is that persistent uncertainty is very, very hard on the human nervous system. It throws allostatic load all out of whack and causes all sorts of issues, which we know from the ACEs study and other trauma research out there. So we're going to shift a little bit and we're going to talk about emotions. So we talked about the mind and we talked about prediction. We're going to talk a little bit about emotions. So this has been a really important part for me on my journey, is understanding what are emotions. Because as a kid, I was always told you're too emotional, like being emotional was a really bad thing. And I needed to keep myself together, sort of thing. But emotions in and of themselves are part of the human experience. They're not good or bad. Emotions are often sensations in the body. So in this top picture, you can see this was from a study done with people feeling different emotions and identifying like where do they feel those emotions at. The darker colors like the red and the yellow is where there's more heat in the body, and the blue and the black is where there's less heat, more coolness. So you can see that different emotions show up in the body differently. Emotions are also energy. Everything in this universe is energy, and emotions are energy as well. And so when we don't have opportunities to be able to navigate through emotions, especially difficult emotions, those emotions, that energy gets stuck in our body, and it can really cause a lot of issues. So even just thinking about maybe after a really stressful week of work, you might notice, for those of you that carry stress in your shoulders and neck like I do, you might notice, I notice my shoulders are almost like touching my earrings, that, there's a lot of tension and tightness. Sometimes if it gets really bad, I get a tension headache. So all of that tightness in the muscles is that holding on to those difficult or stressful feelings and emotions. And then the other thing that emotions are that I think is really interesting is emotions are also chemicals in the body. So like the chemical structure of, say, how love shows up in the body with oxytocin and dopamine and those types of things is different than the chemicals of when I'm feeling stress, where cortisol and adrenaline and those types of chemicals are showing up in the body. So part of how our brain and our body is able to differentiate between the different types of emotions is in part due to the chemical structure or makeup of these different emotions.
Susan, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Melissa's asking, where can I get that picture in study?
I think it might be at the end in references, and if it's not, then I can send it to you or to whoever, Cassandra, and then but you should also be able to Google it, and it will probably pop up pretty easily. But I it might be at the end. I can't remember. I think I have it in references at the end, but
Okay, thank you.
question. Yeah. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to this TED Talk, I'd highly recommend it. This is Dr. Susan David, and she did a TED Talk on the gift and power of emotional courage. And she talked about emotions being part of the human experience. And she said something that I thought was really powerful. She said sometimes people will come to her and they'll say, like, I just don't want to feel disappointed, or I just don't want to feel, I just don't want to feel upset, or whatever it might be. And she says to them, she says, you have dead people goals. Like, as people who are living in these human bodies having these experiences, emotions are part of the human experience, and they're actually the spice of life. If we didn't have our emotions, then life would it would be pretty boring. Think about not feeling joy or happiness or fear or excitement or even sadness and grief, even after having lost people that we love, in that grief, it's still that reminder of that connection that we had with them, that love that we had for them, and we can remember that as well. And so emotions are part of the human experience. They're inherently valuable because they're data to us. If we can see them as data and information helping us to understand what's going on in our environment, what's going on, as far as is what's happening outside and inside, is it what's happening outside coming up against our values and our beliefs. So they can be teachers for us, they can be opportunities for us to learn and to grow, and they can motivate us into doing things. So emotions can be really powerful um, when we are able to navigate them with when we're able to navigate them without trying to control them, so to speak. So anytime we try to like push away or control, then things can get a little bit. So, as I mentioned, emotions often show up as sensations in the body. And I know, being somebody who, for most of my life, spent a lot of my time dissociated, checked out, because what was happening was too painful, too difficult, too traumatic. Being in my body was not something that I was used to doing. So I just want to sort of acknowledge that if you're somebody who your body doesn't feel like a safe place yet, that you really struggle with, noticing your body and the sensations of your body, at any point, you're always, welcome to open your eyes, come back into the space, to stop the meditation at any time. But the body has a lot of wisdom, and so when we can tap into that wisdom and notice the sensations, it can help us to be able to respond. So I'll just give you a really quick example. I don't know, some of you might have heard me give this example before, but I was making dinner one night. This was many years ago. And I say many, probably like 6 years ago, shortly after I started practicing mindfulness and meditation and stuff like that. And my husband and I were making dinner, and we were talking, and he said something, and all of a sudden I felt almost like this punch in the gut. And then I felt like this heat starting to rise up my chest and up my throat. And it's really interesting because it probably took this long, but it felt like time got really long, because in that moment I was like, what is that? Like, what's happening? And then I realized, like, I was really upset. And then I thought to myself, what are you upset about? And I couldn't put my finger on why was upset by something that had been said. And so I just took a couple deep breaths in the belly, did a few belly breaths, and we kept cooking dinner. And my husband had no idea that any of this had happened. But I was very aware that if I had not noticed those sensations in the body, I probably, what would have happened is I would have said something that would have started a fight, and we would have been fighting, and he would have been like, what is her problem? Right. So noticing those sensations helped me to be able to regulate myself and choose how I wanted to respond in the moment. So tapping into our body can be a really powerful tool. So we're just going to do a really a fairly quick body scan. Um, and there's lots of different kinds of body scans, but with this, we're just going to notice sensations in the body. So I'd invite you again to get yourself into a nice, comfortable position. If closing your eyes feels good, you can close your eyes. Otherwise, just having a soft gaze down at the floor or table, desk, whatever's in front of you. And we're going to start by bringing our focus and attention to the very top of the head. And as we're scanning down through the body and we're noticing these different sensations in the body, maybe noticing them as pleasant or unpleasant, let's just see if we can allow them to be whatever is here in this moment. And so sensations might show up as heat, as coolness, as tingling, as vibration. There's lots of different ways that energy can show up in the body. And so just noticing any sensations in this moment on the top of the head. Scanning down from the top of the head to the back of the head where the skull meets the neck. Just becoming aware of any sensations or lack of sensations that are present. We'll come back up to the top of the head and slowly scan down the face, starting with the forehead, the eyes and the eyebrows, the cheeks and the nose, becoming aware of sensations in and around the mouth. So the lips, and then inside the mouth, the tongue, the teeth, the insides of the cheeks, the gums. Just becoming aware of any sensations. Moving down to the chin and the jaw. Becoming aware now of any sensations in the neck and in the throat. Slowly scanning down the back for any sensations, starting at the top of the back, the shoulders, the shoulder blades, moving to the middle of the back and the lower back. Coming back up to the tops of the shoulders and scanning your awareness through your arms, the tops of the arms and elbows, bringing your awareness into the forearms and the wrists. Just noticing what's in this part of the body in this moment. moving out into the hands and the fingers, coming back up to the chest, noticing all of the sensations in the torso, in the chest, perhaps noticing the sensations of breathing, maybe noticing the heart beating. Moving down into the stomach area and the diaphragm. And then moving into the lower abdomen, becoming aware of any sensations here. Noticing what's present in this moment in the hips and in the pelvis. And then streaming your awareness down through your legs, starting with the tops of the legs, the thighs, and the hamstrings. Noticing sensations in the knees. Moving down to the shins and the calves. And then finally moving into the ankles and the feet. Bringing your awareness all the way out through your toes. And so our awareness is something that we can really focus in on something in particular, or we can expand our awareness out. So for just a few moments, we're going to expand our awareness out to take in the whole body in this moment and all of the different sensations happening within the body in this moment. If you'd like, you can close this meditation with just a grounding breath, breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. And then when you're ready to come back into the space, you can open your eyes. And again, just sort of pausing to notice any sensations in the body, thoughts in the mind, emotions, or just noticing what came up for you during that. So, thoughts. What are thoughts? Thoughts too are energy. And something that's really interesting is the energy of thoughts can actually be measured. So when we're engaged in really cognitively demanding tasks, energy signals get sent out or transmitted, and that mass can actually be calculated. So again, it's pretty interesting to think that our thoughts are energy that can be measured. And our thoughts are a representation of something. So often it's like a likeness, a depiction of something. It can be a map or something that represents or corresponds to something else. Our brain is really good at analogy making and sort of categorizing things to help us be able to make sense of something. Another thing that's important to know about the brain is that our brain doesn't differentiate between real sensory input and imagined sensory input. So it's processed the same way in the brain. They've done some studies where if they have somebody who is, say, imagining a really beautiful sunset or a waterfall or a red cardinal or, anything like that, just really imagining what does it look like, the colors, the texture, how is the light hitting it, all those types of things. The visual cortex in the brain lights up as if the brain is seeing that thing. So real sensory information and thought sensory information is processed the same way in the brain. And also, another interesting thing about the brain is that it makes up only 2% of our body mass, but it uses 20% of the body's energy consumption when it's at rest, when it's resting, when our brain is resting. Um, and that doesn't mean nothing's happening because the brain is constantly doing something really hard. Our brain is using 20%. Looks like I might have went unstable again for a minute. Am I back?
You are back now.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. Um, so we're going to do a little activity. One of the things that was really helpful for me and continues to be helpful for me is starting to pay attention to and notice what I call this thought emotion loop. So often we have a thought about something or an emotion, and it might lead to a thought or emotion. So we're just going to be curious about that and experience that for a minute and see how that shows up for us. So I invite you to just get yourself into a nice, comfortable position. And we'll just do soft belly for maybe 20 seconds or so. And remember, in soft belly, we're breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, and really bringing that breath deep into the diaphragm. So now see if you notice a thought that pops up in your mind. If there is there an emotion that's connected to that thought? If you can't identify an emotion connected to it, is there perhaps a sensation in the body that you notice when you have this thought? And once you've identified an emotion or a sensation connected to your thought, I invite you to stay with it if you can. And then see if a new thought comes to mind connected to this emotion or sensation. If a new thought does pop up, see if you can identify perhaps a different emotion or sensation that's connected to this new thought. Now, see if you can simply become aware of your thoughts, sensations, or emotions, observing them as you would a movie or a play if you were sitting in the audience. For example, if you notice some anxiety, you might notice your breath getting shallow or your heart racing. See if you can simply notice these changes in your body, allowing and acknowledging them, but not struggling or trying to control what comes up. See if you notice any patterns in how your thoughts, emotions, and sensations interact with one another. Notice if they influence one another, and if so, how? How are they influencing each other? Now, see if you can step back again, simply observing your thoughts, sensations, and emotions. Remembering that although we have thoughts, sensations, and emotions, we are not these things. We are not our thoughts. We are not our emotions. And we're not our sensations. These are all simply data, information for us that we can use to guide our decisions and actions in life, either consciously or unconsciously. With practice, we can get better at identifying the thoughts, sensations, and emotions that we're having so that we can live our lives with greater awareness and intention, increasing the positive impact that we can have on our world. So now start to bring yourself back gently, becoming aware again of yourself sitting or standing or lying down, noticing your body breathing slowly and deeply. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back into the physical space. And so I'm curious, and you can pop in the chat if you want, if anybody noticed how thoughts and emotions might be connected, how they might interact in ways that maybe you didn't notice before.
Hi, can I say something? I do much better verbal as opposed to
Yes.
written.
Yeah, please.
Anyway, I'm Sue Thompson from Polk County Public Health up in northern Minnesota.
Hi, Sue.
It is amazing for me how much my thoughts and emotions are connected. And I can have a really good day and a thought pops up that triggers an emotion that I don't necessarily want to feel at that time because I'm having a really good day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it really is an interesting, um, piece of information to really, if we can better control, or I don't like that word control, or process,
Yeah.
um, some of our emotions by trying to reconfigure our thought. Like if I have a thought about somebody and that thought triggers, a negative emotion,
Mhm.
um, I can try and look at that thought through a different lens, maybe a more healing, forgiving, loving lens,
Yeah.
um, because it's only harming me at that point.
Right. Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, and thank you for unmuting, Sue. Yes, I I totally agree. So there's a what I hear you saying is in that there's the opportunity to there's something called reappraisal with our thoughts, where we see it in this one way, but we ask ourselves, is there some other way that we could see this? Is there some other way that this could be other than this really narrow way that I'm sort of thinking about it in this moment? What are the other possibilities and potential? And one of the things that I found incredibly helpful with working with thoughts and emotions is trying to, and I'm saying I'm working on this. I'm not good at this yet. Is curiosity, because what I notice is that when I have judgment about emotional state, oh, am I unstable again? Am I back?
Yeah, you're
I'm
back.
sorry. Okay. So when I'm having these thoughts and emotions, and I have judgment about them, what that does is it starts to constrict, right? Because when we have judgment, we're trying to we're trying to protect something. And so if we can have curiosity, then we can be more open. And being more open helps us to see possibilities and potentials that are impossible to see when we're in this closed down sort of defensive position. And so just trying to bring in more curiosity when we have emotions and when we are having these difficult emotions and thoughts, I think is really helpful. But yeah, that reappraisal piece is really important. And and also I appreciate, Sue, how you talked about like not like you might not necessarily want to feel an emotion, but it is about how do we navigate it in a way that that energy doesn't get stuck in our body. So we might not want to necessarily fully process something in that moment, but is there a way that we can still be with what's there and then still continue on? Whether, like for me in that example I gave, it was taking those deep breaths. So I didn't necessarily address the thing with my husband in that moment. And I won't get into triggers and this but that was
Susan, you're unstable again.
my own. It was about me, but I didn't self so that I was able to respond. Oops. I'm hoping that will help. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, we can hear you now. You were
Okay.
unstable right when you started talking about your husband.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I just talked about I was just talking about how that trigger was likely my own. And so in that moment, it really was just about being able to calm my nervous system, bring my brain back online so that I could respond versus reacting to whatever had been said. So
We had a
is
couple other comments
yeah.
in the chat. Lindsay said thoughts impact mood.
Mhm.
And Kathy said the thought I felt in the pit of my stomach.
Oh, yeah. So definitely a strong sensation. That's a great example of how emotions show up as sensations in the body. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So as long as our thought patterns are at this unconscious level, we're not able to change them. It's sort of like underneath the hood of a car. We don't have access to it until we open it up, until we bring awareness to it. That's when change becomes possible. And so one of the things, a practices that have been incredibly helpful for this is mindfulness and awareness. So mindfulness is the sort of that state of mind involving introspection and thought process change. Awareness is sort of that state of mind that's more sensory based on the information that's coming in from our senses, what we see, what we taste, what we touch, what we hear, what we smell, those types of things. So really using the body to get grounded into the present moment. One of the things that I've heard before is that often when we are feeling a lot of maybe depression or those types of things, those types of feelings, those are often when our mind has this incredible ability to time travel. And so when we're feeling a lot of like depression or regret or sadness, a lot of times that can be connected back to our mind living in the past, things that happened before, things that we're upset about or we wish hadn't happened, and we're sort of stuck in the past. When we are feeling lots of anxiety, that's a good indication that our mind is living out in the future in some unknown, unforeseen territory, and that unknown nature is creating some anxiety inside of us. And so the reality is that we can't go back and change the past, and we can't jump forward into the future. The only moment that we have is this moment right now, and that our power resides in this moment right now. Sort of like Dr. Barrett was talking about, sort of planting those seeds. Um, and so mindfulness and awareness can be helpful to help us sort of buffer the prediction brain, right? Remember we talked about the prediction brain sort of after age 5, and and of course if the things aren't aligning what's coming in with our senses and what we're predicting, then sort of our prediction brain sort of goes to sleep, and then our sensing brain comes more online, is really trying to take in, so what is this information and why didn't I get it right? And it's an opportunity for the brain to learn. So it starts to create a new mental model based on this new information because it didn't align with what the brain predicted. So using our senses to get into the present moment can help us to sort of turn down that prediction machine, turn up the sensing machine, and move into responding versus reacting, and really having that beginner's mind. Which is all about curiosity, helps us to cultivate learning, which also helps to quiet the predicting mind. Because when the brain is in learning mode, it can't be in predicting mode. There's sort of two different modes in the brain. Sorry, I do that all the time. Okay, so we are going to end.
Susan, I did miss just one comment.
Oh, yeah.
CB Cole commented, my thoughts made me realize the need for rest and relaxation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And even just slowing down and pausing and checking in that way, right? With our thoughts, with our emotions, with our body. Um, Constant communication happening there, but we're just not always listening. So yeah, that's a great example of that. So we're going to do just a couple minutes of mindful awareness meditation because I do want to leave some time for just additional dialogue. So general awareness meditation, all we're doing is we're just simply going to notice what's coming up for us. So I'd invite you to, get yourself into a comfortable position and just bringing your attention and your focus inward. And we're just simply noticing. We're not trying to have a thought or trying to have an emotion or trying to have a sensation, but we're just noticing when they pop up. And sort of like a cloud in the sky or a leaf on a current in a river, we're going to watch it pop up. We're going to observe it for a little bit and we're just going to watch it pass on by. And then notice the next thought, emotion, or sensation. And remembering that there is no right or wrong way to do meditation. Every time we meditate is an opportunity to learn. And so if you're noticing your mind wandering, the fact that you notice that is fantastic. And then just gently bringing your focus back to noticing thoughts, emotions, and sensations, and then allowing them to pass on by, not getting caught up in them. Releasing any judgment we might have. Simply noticing and letting go. And then once again, becoming aware of your body breathing, becoming aware of the sensations of sitting in a chair if you're sitting. And then when you're ready, bringing yourself back fully by opening your eyes. So we sort of talked about a lot in a little bit of time, and I apologize if it felt really rushed, but we talked about how we thought the brain works. We talked about the sort of umfeld, or that sensory input that we have that differs from species to species, but even from person to person. We talked about how our brain filters information, and also how it fills in information, and how the brain is a prediction machine. And that in order to change our future, we have to change our present. So we have to change what we feel, what we do, what we're experiencing, so that we have sort of new seeds for the brain to use in prediction in the future. We just got done looking at sort of the emotions and thoughts, and sort of that loop that happens between our thoughts and our emotions. And then we talked about mindfulness and the power of mindfulness to sort of shift us from reacting into responding, from predicting into learning, into being. And so let's see if I do not have that one study on the with the body and the colors. That was the one, right, Cassandra, that somebody was
Yes, that's
asking.
right.
So I will get that, and I will send that out. But I just wanted to leave some time. I'm gonna stop sharing, see if there are any questions, any thoughts, what you noticed, what surprised you, anything at all.
Should I leave my email so you can send that to me, or?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat. Here.
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa. I do want to say, like, when I first started learning this stuff, Becky actually had shared some resources with me, and I really found myself pushing against it for a while. Like, that's not right. And then the more I sat with it, and the more I meditated with it, the more I realized that it really is this dance the brain does between predicting and taking in information. And so, anytime that we do something new, that's when the prediction brain sort of again has to quiet down, because something new is happening and it doesn't know how to predict this new thing. And that's when then the learning brain can come online. So yeah, this has been really a really helpful knowing, and then helping me in my own meditation practices, and really working even more with mindfulness throughout the day. And the thing I love about mindfulness is literally you can do anything mindfully. They talk about, so there's like mindful eating practices, or you can wash the dishes mindfully, reading to your kids mindfully, walking mindfully. There's so many different ways that we can bring awareness to what we're doing. Again, using our body as that tool, taking in the senses, to bring ourselves into the present moment and bring that learning mind, that learning brain, that beginner's mind online.
So Susan, a couple things in the chat.
Yeah.
We have, there's another person who would like a copy of the link and put their email in the chat. Kathy asked, do we get the slides? I would like to have the resource slide. And we actually keep getting people who say they want another person just put their email in. Does it work for you, Susan, to just keep adding people's emails, or do you want maybe everybody who's interested to just email you and you can reply to all of them? Which works better for you?
Yeah. So maybe
could it just be added to
there-
the sorry to hop in, but I'm
I can
wondering
add it to
be added to the page where the recording will be.
The link?
Yeah, and I wonder if what I can do is I can just add it to the reference page, and then the slideshow can be shared on near where the recording is. Is that what you're saying, Becky? Maybe?
Yes, that actually would work if you added it to the reference page, and we could include the slides as handouts.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So just email that to me, Susan, and I can make sure it gets in the right place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that takes care of someone else's question that they wanted the slides.
Yeah.
And
I'm seeing this great question from Jennifer. It's easy to apply these techniques when they are planned. It's harder when you're having strong emotions. When the anxiety or emotion comes, it's hard to focus on doing these tools. Do you feel that the more we practice when we are not in a strong emotion, it will be easier when it happens? Yes, absolutely. Again, because our brain wires through experience. So the more we practice these tools and strategies when we don't need them, the more available they are to us when we do need them. That doesn't always mean that every time that we are having a strong or a big emotion that we'll always be able to navigate it in this really beautiful way. But it does mean that we'll have more tools that are available to us to be able to navigate it in a good way, and in a way that hopefully doesn't prolong it. Because what I've noticed in my own life is that when I don't use the tools, or I'm not aware of the thoughts and that emotion loop, I sort of can get stuck in those thoughts or those emotions. And so anytime that you can practice, especially like for me, what's been most helpful is practicing mindfulness throughout the day, practicing awareness throughout the day, because that helps me to notice those thoughts and emotions when they arrive. And then then I have some of those tools. Breathing is one of the most, and the soft belly might not be the one that you love the most. It might be a more active breath, but it really is about finding out what are the tools and strategies that work best for you. And that's again where that curiosity can be really helpful in figuring out what works best for you in different situations, right? Because even no one tool, not a hammer doesn't work for everything. So really noticing like what works best for you in these situations versus these situations. So yeah, someone says mindfulness is like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it, but the more you use it, the easier it gets. Yeah. And the more you use it, remember, the less prediction your brain does, which prediction in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if it's prediction in ways that are reinforcing some of these biases that we have, or perceptions of even ourselves that aren't helpful, then that can be problematic. So having some awareness around that can be really helpful. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate being asked to come back again. And I hope you have a great rest of the conference. And I will, oh my gosh. Hi. Hi, Oscar. I'm sorry. I haven't seen Oscar in so long. Kate and I have sons who are just like, 2 days apart in age. So yeah. Thank you, Kate. So great to see you both. Well, everyone, take care. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And Cassandra, I will get this information to you ASAP. So, oh, you're on mute.
thank you very much. Thank you,
Yeah.
Susan, for joining us. There will be some follow-up. We're going to be uploading some of the handouts and resources to the website along with the recording. So please watch for that. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Miigwech. Gigo Wabaman.